When you're looking at someone's writing, there are 5 steps. Ask them to read it to you, comment on the content, comment on their voice, ask them about spelling, and talk to them about the structure. Now, the reason you ask them to read it to you is because that way you don't embarrass them and yourself by reading it incorrectly. They'll read it to you the way it was meant to be read. But on top of that, you can listen to their voice, and I'll come to that in a minute. The first thing you do once they've read it to you is comment on the content. And that's because we write for an audience and they're telling you about something, just like a conversation. And if you just dive straight into fault finding or trying to help them, you're missing the point of what the writing's about. In terms of their voice, one of the things that you can say for a bit later, but make a note in your mind or on a bit of paper, is that where their voice stops is probably where there's either a comma or a full stop. If they stop just for a little breath, that's probably a comma. If they stop for a significant time, it's a full stop. And that's the way that you can teach them punctuation. So start with full stops. Don't even worry about commas. I mean, if they can get full stops, that's fantastic. And what will happen is that you say to someone, "Oh, when you read that, your voice stopped. I don't see any full stop there." You'll find that if you're sitting next to them, they'll just about gouge a hole in the paper with a pencil or a pen. And after a while, as they read it to you, they will start grabbing a pen and putting those full stops in. So it's a really simple thing that can help people a great deal with punctuation, is listening to their voice. With spelling, ask them to, before you make any comments at all, ask them to underline the words they had problems with, or the words that they aren't sure about, whatever way you want to put it. And then talk about those words. There might be 100 other words in that bit of writing that they made mistakes on, but those are the words they stopped and they thought about, and that's where their passion is. So those are the words you deal with first. If there's nothing in there that, or they got all the words right, then great. You might say something along the lines of, "Well, really well done with those. You were better than you thought you were. I have noticed one or two others. Shall we talk about those?" Then ask them which words they want to put on their spelling practice sheet in the next week. And I'll talk about spelling a bit later in detail. With the structure, ask them about the structure. Does it sound the way you want it to sound? Which parts don't sound right to you then? If they say it sounds the right way they want it to sound, that's it. Leave it. If they say, "Yeah, this part I didn't really like, I couldn't find a way to say that as well," then what don't you like about it? Does it have the right tone? Would some sentences be better shorter or longer, or is there anything you need to add? And then ask if there's anything else they want help with. Uh, it's a really good way to finish off because you might miss things otherwise, and it might be something that's really nagging at them. Talk about what they might do with the structure problems, not "you should do this" or "you should do that." Might's a really powerful word. It doesn't feel like you're correcting and controlling so much as suggesting. Don't correct everything. But the first time that you work with them, say to them, look, I'm not going to correct everything because that might just make you feel a bit hammered or swamped or something. Um, I'll work with you to pick out the most important things to work with. And that way you keep your credibility. If someone else, like their family, looks at their work and says, oh, your teacher hasn't picked out this and you've got that wrong and your teacher didn't say anything about it. It just means that your student can say, oh yeah, we don't work on everything, every mistake I make, and you've normalised it. In general, when you're talking to somebody about their writing, listen more than you talk. Ask questions a lot, and especially, does that make sense, or do you want me to explain it more? Or is that enough? Sometimes we can talk too much. And also comment on body language. You're frowning. Does that mean that I'm confusing you, or tell me what that's about? Um, Tell me what that's about. Commenting on body language and saying, tell me what that's about. It's probably a lot better than trying to interpret it yourself. And you can learn a lot. When you're on the phone, you can also do that. You can just say things like, you're being very quiet. What's going on for you? In fact, you've got to ask a lot more questions when you're on the phone just to get feedback about how the other person's feeling. Off the top of my head, I can't think of some of the questions I would ask now, but I'm absolutely certain that you'll be able to think of them when you're dealing with a student. It's surprising how it kind of comes naturally when you've got someone else on the other end of the phone. And you can just be upfront and say, look, this is quite hard for me on the phone. Tell me what you're thinking or how you're feeling about this. I'll work something out. It depends. A lot of the times the students will tell you, but if they don't, or if there's a long silence, it doesn't hurt to ask. So if you're with a person in the same room, don't go and stand there next to them and lean over them. Either bob down or kneel down or grab a chair and sit down so that you're on the same level. It makes a huge difference to someone's ability to think compared with being stood over. I mean, there's an expression, stand over tactics, and there's a reason for that. Remember, silence is thinking time. It's not just lack of understanding. Sometimes it takes a little while for people to take things in. And that's especially true if you happen to be teaching maths. Always ask before you write on someone's paper. Again, that's if you're with them. If you're in a group of people who want a word spelt out, write it on the blackboard so others can see it as well. If you're working remotely and you're working by Zoom, you can write it on your whiteboard kind of thing they have in Zoom. And if you're just talking on the phone, you could text it to your student. Basic learners can be helped to use a dictionary. Advanced ones can be encouraged to use one. But after they've written, not during their writing, because it breaks the train of thought. So that's part of the editing process. It's what happens after you write. And also, doing that lets you see where they're struggling with spelling when you read their writing. Offer help, but don't stress the need for it. It goes back to the might rather than should. And that's about it.